Galveston, Texas at Pier 21, right across from the Gulf Copper shipyard where Texas is in dry dock. She went into dry dock last night. A little after midnight this morning, they finally got her high and dry like you see her right now. Pier 21 is not only the best place to watch or come out and see the battleship in what will be her home for probably the next 9 to 12 months or so, but it is also, according to at least one article I've seen, one of several home locations for the ship when she comes out of dry dock sometime in the second half of 2023. So that's still very much to be determined, but so it's as good a place as any to come see the ship right now. Yesterday and today are extremely special for us naval history enthusiasts because of just how rare it is for a battleship to go into dry dock. I was born in March of 1990, which was the same month that Texas came out of her last dry dock period. And those are the only 2 times she's been in dry dock as a museum ship, which has been her life since 1948. So that's not a whole lot of dry dockings in a pretty long time. In my lifetime, in fact, we've only seen, this is what, the 3rd dry docking we've seen for a battleship. So we're going to go through that real quick when the battleships have been dry docked. So first off, let's look at a battleship when she's in active service. For example, Battleship New Jersey during her 80s commission. It is extremely common for battleships to go into the yard about every 2 years. They get out, they do some training, they do some operational stuff, and they identify some deficiencies, especially in an older vessel like a World War II era battleship still being operated in the 80s and 90s. So New Jersey is in the yard from 81 to 82, being reactivated. She goes out in the Pacific, crosses through the Panama Canal into the Mediterranean Sea for the Lebanese Civil War, and comes back to the West Coast around 1984. She goes into dry dock after that extremely prolonged cruise, the longest of any ship since World War II in terms of duration. And so she's got her first major yard period then. And then she goes back out, does some other cruises, and then in 88 goes back into the yard again. Comes back out, and then in 90 she goes into the yard again to be deactivated. So 1991, when she comes out of the yard and is decommissioned in February, is the last time New Jersey was dry docked. The Navy's guidance for maintaining inactive ships is that a ship that is not being actively used should be dry docked every 20 years. And the simple truth is, we are not able to do that. No museum organization has ever been able to dry dock a battleship more than once. And many, such as New Jersey, have never raised the funding to dry dock a battleship. How much does it cost? Well, the folks at Texas have somewhere around $35 million to spend, but the Texas Parks Commission that was running her prior to the foundation took over estimated that they would need to do $100 million of work on the ship. So somewhere between 35 and 100 million for a ship as old as Texas. For an Iowa-class battleship, when Missouri was dry docked most recently, they spent about $18 million. And that was in the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, so it's probably a little bit more expensive than what New Jersey would need if she was dry docked in a civilian yard in the next couple of years. But we don't have any concrete plans. We would be looking for about $12 million at this time. So, Texas is...
Some people are asking how old Texas's dry dock is, if you want to throw that in there.
Oh, we already have a question on the feed. How old is Texas's dry dock? It's sort of new. So we were talking to somebody from Gulf Copper yesterday. They said that this was originally a floating dry dock down in the Caribbean for dry docking cruise ships. I have no idea how old the full dry dock was down there, but they put in a ship that was too heavy for what the dry dock was rated for, and it broke in half. So they start to scrap it, and then Gulf Copper, knowing that they already had a potential client in Battleship Texas, was willing to buy what was left of that dry dock to bring it up here and create a new berth. Prior to that, Texas had no idea where they could go. There were bids from South Korea, there were bids from Odessa in the Ukraine for taking her, and those towing her there and doing it in a foreign yard would have been cheaper than doing it in a dry dock here. But because Gulf Copper knew they were going to have business for the first year after they bought this dry dock, it became lucrative for them to do it, and they were able to partner with Texas. Gulf Copper, of course, has been a great partner to museum ships because a different one of their yards earlier this year dry-docked Orlik, and one of their yards, or the same one that dry-docked Orlik, is working with USS Kidd to dry-dock her in the near future. That hasn't all gone through yet, but they're working with museum ships.
Real quick, whose ship?
What?
Alyssa.
Oh, another question was, what's this tall ship over here behind us? Also on or near Pier 21. That is Alyssa. She is a museum ship that you can come and visit in Galveston.
They want to know when they're going to dry dock New Jersey.
So when are we going to dry dock New Jersey? She's overdue. She's overdue. We do not have a date. We do not have the money to do it. You have to pay the full cost of the dry docking prior to being released from the dry dock. And if you're still in the yard, you're still accruing costs. So we estimate it will be about $12 million based on a bid that we got from the dry dock that we're interested in back just at the beginning of the pandemic. So that is already 2 years out of since it was last proposed, which means that we'd have to get a new proposal.
There are lots of questions about what's going to happen to Texas.
Okay, yeah, we'll come back to what's going to happen to Texas later on. Let's talk about the purpose for this video: museum battleship dry dockings. So Texas is the first battleship to become a museum, 1948, and she was dry docked at some point at that time by the Navy. She did not get a full inactivation dry dock like New Jersey gets in '91, where all the sea chests are blanked over and other stuff like that. We're going to do a future video in the next couple of weeks talking about what her last dry docking was. But she becomes the first museum battleship to be dry docked in 1988, 1989. At that time, she is transferred from the Battleship Texas State Commission to the Park Service, and the Park Service spends a couple of years doing studies and learning the ship, and then they get the money from the state to put her into dry dock. So that was the first time in 40 some odd years, and now this is the first time in 32 years since she's been in dry dock. Remember, I said that the Navy guidance is every 20 years for an inactive ship, every 2 years for an active one. So the next battleships to be opened as museums: Alabama, Texas, North Carolina. Alabama and North Carolina are put in the mud intentionally, as was Texas initially, so that hurricanes can't carry them out to sea. This means that it is prohibitive to take them out of their dry berths and dry dock them. So both Alabama and North Carolina have had great work done in situ, and there are no current plans to dry dock either of those vessels as museum ships. They're both doing great work on them as we speak, and they've got very detailed maintenance plans. Check out the work Alabama's been doing on their wood deck, and the work that North Carolina's been doing on the shell plating at the bow and on the mast in the last 2 years. So they're fine right where they are for the time being. Both of them have like a cofferdam causeway thing built all the way around the ship. Massachusetts, much like New Jersey, is pretty far north, which means that there is a slow season. So Massachusetts was taken into dry dock, that would have been 1998, most recently. So she did a couple of months there in '98. It's important to note, some of these battleships I'm going to talk about have no plans to go into dry dock, because you're not only paying to put the ship in dry dock, but you're also losing all the money you would make while the ship is away from where she's open to the public. So ships like USS Iowa, USS Wisconsin do not have plans to dry dock. Normally it is more expensive to do work in situ on the ship than it is to do it in the dry dock. However, when you factor in the money you're going to lose from being closed, then it becomes more expensive to dry dock, and it's better to stay open and just do the work in situ. So both Iowa and Wisconsin plan to just do work on their underwater hulls where they are, and they've already got maintenance plans and everything else done there. So another thing you should take away from this video, the same stuff doesn't work for everyone. It's very much dependent on where your ship is, what the maintenance needs are of the vessel. So right now we've got 5 battleships that have no plans to dry dock. North Carolina, Alabama, Wisconsin, Iowa.
Sorry.
Maybe it's just 4. And then we've got 3 that have been dry docked: Texas, Massachusetts. Missouri was the most recent battleship dry dock prior to yesterday. In 2009, she completed I believe it was 3 or 4 month yard period in Pearl Harbor. She is the only one of the Iowas to be dry docked by the museum. So that leaves us with New Jersey as needing to be dry docked. We will most likely be the next one. Don't tell my good friend and peer Megan, who's the executive director up at Battleship Cove. You guys saw her on a couple of videos we did about Missouri. She used to be their curator. So she's co-starred with me on this show before. She, now the executive director up at Battleship Cove, is in a race with me to get Massachusetts into the yard before we can get New Jersey into the yard. New Jersey's going to be the next battleship to be dry docked. We're going to get her in the yard first. Yeah, so not very often that this happens, that these ships go into the dry dock.
There's a question if this is the most expensive museum ship dry docking.
Ooh, that's a good question. Most expensive museum ship dry docking. Estimated right now around $35 million. That could go up or down based on the scope of work that's actually completed.
Constitution, maybe?
It's definitely the most expensive battleship dry docking. Let's see, the most recent Missouri dry docking, $18 million. The most recent Massachusetts dry docking was $10 million for both Massachusetts and Lionfish.
Chances you can put more than one ship in at a time if you really want to.
Didn't happen with.
But they did it on HSB. Somebody asked about that too.
Let's see, and I don't know what the cost was back in '88 when she went into the yard.
Not Nautilus.
But oh yeah, Nautilus, the submarine Nautilus just got out of the yard like in the last couple of weeks. That was a $35 million project as well. Nuclear submarine being done at a nuclear submarine shipyard, not a private yard like this. So it is possible that other museum ship dry dockings have been more expensive up till now, but off the top of my head, Texas and Nautilus are currently tied. Yeah, another question, can multiple ships fit in a dry dock? Yes, when I worked at Historic Ships in Baltimore, we put both Constellation and the submarine Torsk in the same dry dock. It's a big 1,000-foot dry dock down at the Sparrows Point Bethlehem Steel Shipyard outside of Baltimore. And those 2 ships sat in the forward right-hand corner of the dry dock, and the other 3/4 of the dry dock were completely empty. You could fit multiple ships in. My beloved Taney was one of 4 ships built side by side in dry dock number 3 at the Philadelphia Navy Yard, same dry dock that New Jersey is built in and reactivated in. So you can fit multiple ships in. In fact, when Texas went into the dry dock last night, the tugboats went in with her to keep her in position until they got her on the blocks securely and started to raise it.
We're getting lots of questions about Olympia.
Okay, lots of questions about Olympia up there right now. The director or the vice president of operations who's been running this, my counterpart there, Travis Davis, who you might have seen on Battleship Texas's channel a couple of times or on the live streams yesterday. He was formerly the director of operations on Olympia, so we talk about her pretty often. They are still planning a dry dock evolution. They don't have anything firmly in place yet. That ship, they're still doing a lot of work around the hull with a small cofferdam system to get the ship stabilized to a point that they're comfortable putting her in dry dock. For those of you who don't know, Olympia has gone the longest of any steel-hauled vessel afloat without being dry docked. She was last dry docked in 1945.
We're getting a lot of questions. Why don't they just put the whole thing in concrete or mud? Or permanently on land?
How many times do I have to address this? Ships are designed to be in the water. Water pushes in all directions on a ship, and that's what they're designed to handle. When you put a ship on land, you only have two forces acting: gravity down and the equal and opposite force pushing up. There's nothing holding the sides in. So you see this with HMS Victory in Portsmouth. The ship starts to pancake over time. As gravity pushes down, the ground pushes up, nothing pushes in on the sides. So that is not a viable long-term solution for preserving a ship. The best way to preserve a ship is in the environment that that ship was designed to operate in.
Do you want to talk about some of the work that's going to happen to Texas?
So, going back to what is planned to happen on Texas. The first thing they're going to do is blast the hull. And this is my guess from work I've done on other dry dockings. I have not talked extensively with the Battleship Texas folks. I have not read a report or a plan or anything like that. So this is purely Ryan Szymanski from New Jersey talking about this. This isn't any official or actual information. You guys should definitely check out Texas's social medias for more information on this. But from my experience, the first thing they're going to do, and while the hull is still wet, they're going to blast it, probably with high pressure water. That's going to get all the marine growth off. It's going to blast all of the chlorides from the salt water and everything that's leaching the steel off. So that is giving them a good basis to then weld or paint or do whatever else they're going to do. Texas has some really significant issues with her torpedo blisters. The torpedo blisters were added around 1928 when she receives a major upgrade. They're not part of the original design. From day one, they leaked. Remember, they're installed by the lowest bidder. And so throughout her entire career, they have leaked, which means that there's now water sitting inside the ship, which is now corroding both the outside steel to make it leak more and the inside steel to go further and further through the ship. So there has been discussion as early as 1998, when she was originally in dry dock, to remove those blisters and replace them with just a facsimile. There has been discussion also to replace the blisters 100% more or less accurately, but you cannot replace this like material in a like fashion, which would be the ideal. It's too expensive. You can't do it for $35 million because we don't rivet anymore. Riveting it's not a lost art. You still do it on the Great Lakes some, but Gulf Copper doesn't do it. They're not set up for it. They don't have kilns or experts here to rivet the ship back together. So you're going to do something different. You're going to, whatever you add is going to be welded. So we don't want the same problems to happen in the future as have happened in the past. So I can't say with 100% certainty what they're going to do. I can say I would support a cosmetic repair where what you see above the waterline of the torpedo blisters are fabricated reasonable facsimiles, and what you see below the water is whatever they have to do to make the hull watertight, whether that's welded plates over the whole thing or some really hyper-modern system of epoxy coatings or something. I'm sure that museum has already determined their course of action.
We are getting a lot of questions about seeing the underside of the ship and all that, so I think we need to be directing them to Texas Channel for all those details.
Yes, so we have not gotten into dry dock yet. There's a chance we won't get into dry dock at this time. So you should definitely subscribe to Texas's channel. Go over to their Facebook page. Go over to their Twitter, whatever social media they have. I think they have a TikTok. They are going to be posting information on their plans. They're going to be posting pictures from the dry dock and things that are going on, and from their warehouse up in Houston, where they're working on some of the anti-aircraft guns and other things that have been removed from the ship, so that it can all be thrown in 9 months to a year when they're finished and possibly ready to bring it over here to Galveston, or maybe Bay City, or somewhere else, probably within about an hour of her former berth in San Jacinto.
Oh, we're not getting a lot of questions about why we aren't allowed in the dry dock at this point in time. So
why are we not allowed in the dry dock at this point in time?
Safety.
Like we don't work for the yard. We're not covered under their insurance. They're starting a major process to replace possibly hundreds of tons of steel on this ship. They can't have a couple of yahoos like us standing in the bottom filming it.
Do you want to cover again her plans of where she might go? We're getting lots of questions about that. You might have missed it from the beginning.
Okay. It has not been announced where Texas is going to go. We are on Pier 21 in Galveston, which is, according to at least one article that I've seen posted online, one of the contenders for where the ship will go. So there's a chance that she gets pulled out of there and ends up tied up right here in downtown Galveston. There have been a number of other cities in the area, mostly within an hour of the San Jacinto battlefield where she originally was, like Bay City, Texas, and Beaumont, I think, is another one. So they've got a couple of bids to choose from, and they're working with all of these cities individually to determine which one can support them best. I saw one article estimated it would take 600,000 visitors a year to give enough ticket revenue to maintain the ship. Texas, at the San Jacinto battlefield, got 80,000 visitors a year. My math is about 250,000, about 3 times what she was getting is what she needs for long-term preservation. So if that city can't offer that, then it's out. She needs a berth of a certain dock, something like 30 feet deep. So if they don't have a pier that's long enough for a 600 and something foot vessel by 108 feet, that's not 30 feet deep, or they won't offer to dredge it out for the museum before it comes, then you can't have a museum. If they don't have parking, why even bother? If people can't get there easily, there's no point. If they don't have restaurants and places to eat, it's not a good home for the ship. So they're going to be evaluating a ton of possibilities based on applications that these towns are putting in. And it'll be months before we hear where they choose.
We're getting some questions about working on the hull underneath the blocks.
Oh, okay. So ships have 3 different blocking positions on their blueprints, A, B, and C.
You need to explain that more.
So there is a blueprint that says exactly where the keel blocks need to go for the ship to sit on them. This way, the sea chests, the holes in the bottom of the ship, are not covered by the blocks. You don't have the weight of the ship sitting on points that are not designed to be able to handle that. So there are a certain position that these blocks go in, and then there are 3 different ways the ship can sit on that. So what you do is you put the ship in on the blocks, you blast it, you paint it, you're ready to go, you flood the dock again, and you do what's called a bump, or fleeting, and you move the ship to the next docking position. You raise it again, and then you do those sections under the blocks, and there's maybe some areas that are still under it, so you might have to do that a 3rd time. The Navy typically does 3 with World War II era ships. All the docking plans have those 3 different positions. Most museum ships have gotten it down to 2, and some have even decided not to bump it because it's a huge expense to flood the dry dock and then raise it again and pay for a diver to make sure it's on the blocks right, or multiple divers for a ship that size. So if I had to guess, and again, this is the assumption of Ryan Szymanski from New Jersey, not anything I've been told from Texas people or anything else. They will have better information than this. If I had to guess, they'll probably bump her once later on in the process.
We talked a lot about battleships going to dry dock. What about the carriers? Any word on them?
Okay, carriers going to dry dock. Let's see. Midway has no plans to go into dry dock. They make more than enough money there. It's too expensive to take her out of dry dock. She's huge. There are a small number of dry docks that can take her. They are able to do all their work in situ, and they frequently have divers down putting underwater setting coatings on, scraping the bottom of the hull, that sort of stuff. Lexington, Yorktown are both in the mud. They are intentionally in the mud, Gulf Coast, so they don't get swept out by hurricanes. Intrepid has been dry docked once since she was turned into a museum ship around 1970. That was in my lifetime. I can't remember the exact year. It would have been the late 90s, early 2000s. She was towed out to dry dock. And Hornet, Hornet's the only one of these carriers I haven't been on yet. As far as I know, she has not been dry docked yet. And I'll have to talk with them when I finally go out and visit her, hopefully sometime in the near future, and figure out what their plans are for dry dock, if they plan to do it in situation, or if they're going to, if they have active plans like New Jersey's trying to make.
We've had, circling back to an earlier question, future museum ship dry dockings, who will be the most expensive? What will be the biggest project?
Let's see. The biggest projects coming up. Well, after Texas, Beaufin is going to be the next one to be dry docked. They just announced that on September 20th, she's going into a yard in Pearl Harbor. That should not be that expensive based on what other submarines have paid to dry dock recently, such as Pampanito and Cod. And Beaufin is able to get yard availability every 20 years or so in accordance with Navy guidelines. So she should not be any sort of issue. She's just getting what we call a shave and a haircut. It goes and they blast the stuff off that's on there, all the growth, and they spray new coatings of paint on. And it should be most of the work she needs. Let's see. Olympia will be expensive. That ship needs a lot of work just because of how long she's been out of the yard. Like I was saying with New Jersey, it's about $12 million to dry dock her now. The day we spring a leak, that price doubles. And the day we go 2 decades past that 20 years that the Navy wants, once we hit that 40-year mark, like Texas did, that number quadruples, whether there's leaks or not. There will be leaks at that point. So the price is very much not dependent on the size of the ship, but on how long it's been since she was dry docked last and how bad the deterioration is. But
Salem has been brought up. She is a large ship.
Okay, yeah. So we've talked about the cruisers, we've talked about the battleship, or we talked about the battleships and carriers. Let's talk about the cruisers. Only one of the 3 museum cruisers in the United States has ever been dry docked as a museum. Olympia has not been. Little Rock has not been. So that leaves Salem. Salem was last dry docked in the late 90s. I want to say 99 or 2000 off the top of my head. And they are planning her next availability, much like New Jersey. They don't have a date in mind, but it is very much known there that the ship will need to go into dry dock in the near future. That's unless there's some serious deterioration, and they are doing a lot of work to arrest deterioration, like they just installed a new impressed current cathodic protection system that's going to help protect the underwater hull. And there are no known leaks at this time. But as long as that stays the case, my guess would be somewhere in the 5 to 10 range, depending on the yard they go to. And again, they developed that first leak, just double that.
I think we could do a recap of how much it's going to cost and that sort of circle back.
Okay, one more time for those of you who are just tuning in. Texas's dry docking is estimated by me to cost about $35 million. That's how much money the state gave the foundation. They are also raising money, and that's going to help them as well, but that money not only goes into what they need to do in dry dock, that's going to be the money that they use to set up their new facility wherever they end up docking the ship. And some of that $35 million was already spent to get the ship to a position that she can go into dry dock.
We have had someone ask several times, why don't we just do what they did to Mikasa? So I think we hit that one more time.
Why don't we just do what they did to Mikasa? Because Mikasa is in terrible shape on the inside. When you dry berth a ship, again, I feel like this is the 100th time I've said it on the channel. Ships are designed to be in the water where you've got water pressure acting on 3 sides and gravity pushing down, so that holds the whole ship together. When you put a ship in concrete or mud or sand or in a dry dock with things holding it in place, you've now got pressure pushing up, gravity pushing down, nothing pushing in on the side, so the ship pancakes out over time. Within 100 years, you've lost your ship. Concrete is the absolute worst thing. Mikasa sitting in concrete. You cannot get down there to paint. Concrete is acidic, so as the water goes through concrete, which is porous, it takes all that acidic stuff out, which corrodes the steel faster. And you cannot get to the steel to fix it. And the water works its way through the concrete. Because there's no air movement, it's not going to evaporate, so it stays held by that spongy concrete against the hull until it and the acid has eaten its way through the hull, and then that hole just keeps leaking even though your ship is on land.
Someone who knows us well knows that every time we've dry docked a ship, it has rained. They're asking if they think it's a bad sign it didn't rain.
I think my luck's finally turning. Every time we dry dock a ship, it rains. That has been my experience every single time. The ones we've caught on video and the ones that happened before we created the YouTube channel. They were calling for rain all week, and we've had 2 absolutely gorgeous days. The rain missed Galveston entirely. I take it as a good sign.
I would do one last recap of what's going on and send them to the channel, and we'll cut it.
All right, so one last recap. We are 1 day into Texas's dry docking. She got into the yard yesterday. They got her on the keel blocks after midnight this morning. So there is Texas high and dry at the Gulf Copper Shipyard in Galveston, Texas. We are on Pier 21 in Galveston, Texas, which again, one of many potential homes of the ship in the future. There's at least one article out there that I read this morning that says this is one of the areas that's being considered. That's where I got that information from. I don't have any privileged information on this. There are a number of potential other places besides Galveston that include Beaumont, Bay City, and even back to San Jacinto is a possibility, although unlikely because of the number of guests she was getting there. An article said that the ship needs 600,000 guests to be sustainable as a museum. She was getting 80,000. I think 600 is too high. About 250,000 seems to be the point between those museum battleships that are successful and self-funding and those museum battleships which are not self-funding. Should I talk about the...
I would do a quick recap on the work happening in Texas, inside and out, and superstructure. They're asking all sorts of things.
Okay, the work happening, they're primarily focusing on the exterior parts of the ship in dry docking. Anything you do in the yard is more expensive than if you were doing it pier side. So the plan is the tier 1 things that have to be done first is patching the holes in the ship. The holes are predominantly at the stern, which was the thing pointing towards the Houston Ship Channel that was getting the most erosion as ships sailed by. It was kicking up silt that's then sandblasting the back of the ship. And along the blister tanks, which were added in 1928 and always leaked. So those are the areas where they're going to be focusing first in replating. Because this could take up to a year, they will start to bring in contractors to do topside and interior work. This is going to allow them to restore spaces so that when they bring the ship to whatever her home is, they can open it to the public and they have interpreted spaces. They're also going to look at money dependent, time dependent, redecking the ship. Like other battleships, she has a wood deck, and that wood deck has a finite lifespan. It was last done in the early 90s, like 90-91 time frame. Lasts about 20 years. It has been 30 years, so that is a project to restore. Battleship New Jersey's redecking is costing $5 million. Texas has a similar surface area because they have more exterior deck, even though they are a significantly smaller vessel. So right around 43,000 square feet or 1 acre, just like New Jersey. So $5 million price tag is a reasonable guess for that project, or that part of the project. Again, that can be accomplished in dry dock if they have the time. It would be cheaper to do pier side, but that's then going to further delay when she can open to the public, which hopefully will happen the back half of 2023 when she comes out of dry dock, or possibly that gets kicked down the road if the place that she comes is not set up to accommodate her. like Pier 21 here in Galveston, you've got restaurants and parking all nearby. It would be relatively quick to bring her across the channel, put in some mooring dolphins, and open her to the public. If she goes somewhere where you have to dredge, like I believe is the case up in Beaumont, and they might need to build a visitor center and who knows what else, ticket booth, that might push things down the road. But again, I don't work for them. I don't know. Go over to Battleship Texas's YouTube page, Facebook page, Twitter, whatever social media you prefer, and check out this information from the horse's mouth. Everything I'm saying is just from my own experiences, and it may be 100% wrong. But Travis and the great staff over at the Battleship Texas Foundation, who have gotten the ship this far after 32 years, have better information than I do. So check them out. As of now, there are only 18,000 of you subscribed over there. I would love to see 50,000 by the end of the month. So, Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. Consider donating to Battleship Texas. She really needs the funds to get through this yard period and be able to open up again so we can all go on and visit her. We will drop a link in the description of the comment section down below. I'm not sure how it works with live videos, so you can head over to their donate page and support them. You can also support both museums by liking, sharing, subscribing our various social media content so that it gets pushed out there to more people and more people find out about our museums. Thank you guys for watching.